A ver. Uy. Hola a todos y todas.
Hello, good evening, everyone. First of all, if you see me with a mobile, I am not on TikTok. It is just some notes I took so I don't forget anything. Thanks to the 42 festival to put me on board. I am very enthusiastic about this. I hope everything will be all right. And obviously, I want to thank all the staff, the bookstore, the publishing houses, in particular Salamandra and Llegames, the publishing houses of the books of the authors that we have here today. As the title of the table says, we are going to talk about the desire and repression. We're going to see the common points, the common subjects of both authors. And last but not least, at the end of this talk, of this round table, outside there is a tent for signatures where you can buy her books, these and other books of the genre for all tastes. Now I'm going to ask some questions to the authors. They will tell us about their books, their ideas, and of course, I am sure you will have questions to them. So the last 15 minutes will be devoted to the question and answers. First of all, I want to introduce you the authors. It is an honor to be with them. I read both books. I am super fan of both of them. I want to introduce you Kim. She comes from the rural Midwest of the United States. At the age of 16, she moved to New York to be an instrumentist and an actress. She wrote 5 novels, one of them awarded with the Bram Stoker Award. The book was just translated into Spanish. Salamandra. It is a young, grown-up dystopia related to feminism with international great success. A young woman is facing a society in where women are considered as danger people. We also have Kelly Robson from Canada. She is graduated in English by the University of Alberta, though she is living in Toronto. She is the author of several books nominated to several awards, and she won the Nebula 2018. She just published Versailles Water, that is also outside, also finalist of the World of Fantasy and Nebula Award. Some of the books just published, El Año de Gracia, which is also a novelty, and I will give the floor to the authors so they can tell us about the novels in case you haven't read any of them or one or the other, so they will present themselves. I don't know, Kim, if you want to talk about your novel without spoilers.
Yeah, I can tell you about The Gracier. The Gracier is about a society that believes that young girls are full of dangerous magic, that they can lure grown men from their beds and do all sorts of wicked things. So for this reason, they are banished into the wilderness for their 16th year to rid themselves of their powers so they can return purified and ready for marriage. But it's not the elements and the wilderness that really is their biggest threat. Turns out that the thing that they fear the most turns out to be each other. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun.
Bueno, menos mal que atendí en clase de inglés.
Fortunately, I attended English courses because I didn't get the translation so far. But
Ya.
That's okay.
Sí.
I'm okay to talk about Waters of Versailles, which is my book that is newly out. Actually, only just received copies at the Gigamesh bookstore yesterday. It's fantastic. Yes. It's set in 1738 at the court of Versailles during the reign of Louis XV. And it is about a very sexy, very self-assured courtier whose name is Sylvain, and he has come to the court to make his fortune. And how he has decided to do that is he has captured a water nixie who has the innate ability to control water. And he has come to the court and put himself in charge of all of the fountains, all of the water systems of the court, and ultimately he has invented toilets. But to his surprise, he finds that this magical creature is like a child, not so easy to control, will not be told what to do, has to be parented. And so this allows him to realize eventually that when you care for something, when you are forced to care for something and take care of something and nurture it, it changes you. Mm. So this is Waters of Versailles.
Bueno, a más novelas, como sabéis.
More novels, as you could hear, they have in common the main element, that's the figure of the woman at the center of the story. She's pulling the threads on one hand during in the Grace year. The women are like witches. They have to go to a camp and they have to be controlled and guarded in case they would get in trouble. And in Aguas de Versalles, there is Nyx, like a revengative creature, someone who you cannot trust. So how can we work with these characters? How can we describe them? How did you describe them?
I think one of the biggest elements of the Grace Year that I wanted to deal with as far as the girls and the threats and all of that is this internalized misogyny, which we all have to different degrees, and really explore why women tear each other down. It's often, all these other elements with, there obviously it's a patriarchy in the society, and there's obvious those threats, and patriarchy doesn't serve anyone, in this community except for the patriarchy. But the men and the boys and the girls and the women are all kind of pitted against each other to survive in this world. And so that's really what I wanted to explore, and eventually, how these girls come to terms with each other. And I think for me, writing this book, I thought I was a pretty decent feminist. And when I started writing this book, I started questioning everything. I started questioning, instead of just me being like, well, I just don't like her. It's like, well, why don't you like her? What is it about her that you don't like? Is it something that you find threatening? Is there a quality that this person has that you dislike in yourself? And 9 times out of 10, the problem was my own. And so it was therapeutic for me to do as well. But I think a big lesson that I learned in this, and a big part of the book, is when we can meet women where they are and not where we want them to be, that's when my whole world opened up, and for Tierney's as well in this book. Because we are, stronger together and can do a lot. But it was an interesting way to to look at. I don't know if any of you have read it yet, but it gets pretty hairy in there. It gets a little gnarly, but it was good. And at the end, there's a lot of hope. So, and I feel that too.
Isn't it interesting? When I am drafting a story or a book, I find that if it isn't going well, if I feel like I'm stuck, usually the problem is characterization. It's not plot, it's never plot. It's always the character. But I didn't have any problems with the character of the Nixie in Waters of Versailles because she is a child. And where she came from was a friend of ours had been living they were yacht bums. They had been living in the Caribbean for years and years and years and had a baby down there. And they had come to Vancouver to make money and brought the child with them. She was 3 years old. She was the size of a 7-year-old because they're both very tall people. So she was 3 and huge and very uncontrollable because she'd never worn shoes before.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's where the character of the Nixie came from. A very powerful child. Very vulnerable, very young, but also incredibly powerful. And how frightening is that?
Yeah.
It's frightening to the parent. It's frightening to everyone. So what an opportunity for chaos. And chaos does happen right from the very first paragraph. So,
wow.
Yeah.
I'm excited to read it.
I hope you enjoy it.
Bueno, yo os quería preguntar.
I wanted to ask you now that you were saying this, I was wondering what a responsibility, if any of you is also a writer. I don't know if this ever happened to you. You are on a subject, and as Kim said, I had to learn a lot about what I was writing about. Have you felt this fear vis-a-vis the reaction of people? Or, I mean, are you aware that you have to put 100%, or maybe you left something aside and something that you wanted to put on the book?
I mean, as writers, we need to go to the dark places, we need to go to the difficult places, and we need to dive into our own experiences of emotion to bring the emotion to the page. One of the places that I went in Waters of Versailles was my father's death. And honestly, when I was drafting the scenes that were drawing on that, I got myself into tears. So that is definitely one thing that we can never get away from, we can never step away from, is the things that make us emotionally distraught. If we step away from them, the pages won't be as powerful as they would otherwise. I don't know if you find that.
I do. And it's funny because I do some events with some authors that have no feeling, they're just like, I've never cried writing a book. Like, I know, it's shocking because I cried through this entire book. So.
Yeah.
But I think also a big thing, like with the Grace Year, I never thought anyone would read it. I mean, I thought maybe like my mom might read it, like my daughters. But if I knew what was going to happen with this book and I went into it writing that, I would have never been able to write it. I mean, if it was so specific to my point of view and something that I had to get out. It didn't even have a choice. When the idea came to me, I was compelled to write it. And I couldn't care, what other people thought. It was my truth, and it was what I felt. And I was really shocked when, all these other countries started publishing it and all these things. Like, I'm really shocked because it seemed like such a specific viewpoint. And to have somebody clear across the world, from completely different circumstances, be able to relate to it and say, like, I felt like you wrote this for me. That's mind-blowing. I still can't wrap my head around it that I'm even here. So, so basically let your freak flag fly, right?
Absolutely.
You got to just write what you want to write, and it doesn't matter the outcome, I think that's a big part of it.
And the one thing that you have to bring to your writing that nobody else can is your own weird perspective.
For sure.
As if it's personal to you, if it means something to you, and other people aren't getting it, then you have a really easy job ahead of you. All you have to do is figure out how to get that stuff onto the page. Much more difficult if you know how to get stuff on the page, but you don't know how to get to the emotions.
Ugh. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be bad.
That would be
Let's
bad,
not
wouldn't
do
it?
that.
No, let's not. We'll just be a mess.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Bueno, habéis hablado ya.
You talked a bit about this. I also wanted to ask you, in both stories, each on your own, you have you convey a message of social criticism about repression and inequality. What did you want to transmit through and with your stories? Is it a message that you wanted to convey from the beginning of the novel, or, as you said, Kim, it came just like that, and it might have been changing step by step? How did you live it?
I don't know. Let me think about it.
Okay.
Yeah,
mine is pretty easy because we're talking about the court of Louis XV. I can criticize that. There's a lot of terrible things to say about that. What's interesting is even though my main character, Sylvain, is a soldier, a courtier, he's an upper-class man, this world is still not meant for him. He could reach the heights. He could reach the heights, but it would mean denying his own soul, because he's learned to be a better person. He's learned to love. He's learned to nurture, and he's learned to. There's a secondary character named Annette, who he is having sex with in the first scene, and it's it's pretty explicit, sexy. Apparently, my head editor was...
Un poco.
Yeah, my head editor was reading it on the subway, and she had to close it because she was feeling a little bit too exposed. The fact is that we all need to be true to ourselves, and the political structures that we grow up in are not usually going to allow us to be true to ourselves, even if we happen to be, like Sylvain is, a white man in a world ruled by white men.
I think with this book, the only thing that I set out to do was I really wanted the book to mimic where I felt we were in the women's movement in the US anyways, which is like right in the middle. There's no glory in the middle of anything. And I mean, the election, which is, you know, with Hillary, was such a big upset. And I just realized, I think at that moment, like, this is going to take a long time, a lot longer than we wanted it to take. Yeah. And I think that with a lot of young people too, and my own kids, you know, they all want to do something good, but they want to do it in this grand, big way. Yeah, and which is, it's so cool, and I love all the ambition and all the things they want to do, but there's also so much gratification in the small things, and it's the small things that add up to become something meaningful. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to show that. Tierney is not the hero, you know, she's not the hero of this story, it's really the middle of the story. And I wanted to pick up right where that was, and with the reader too. Like, there's no explanation of what time it is, where they are, and I just wanted to drop the reader right into the middle of it where I felt like we were. And the story continues, you know, and so I really wanted to show that there is so much hope, but it's not going to be an overnight fix. It's going to take a long time.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that funny how we always think it's not worth doing unless it's this complete fix that we're going to change over right now? We were talking at our incredible Catalan lunch this afternoon about electric planes.
Okay.
about how NASA has decided that electric planes, the American electric plane fleet, or American domestic plane fleet will be electric by 2035. Boeing is working on electric jets for 2035. But right now, right this second, Canada and Western Canada and Western US, little tiny companies that are doing regional prop planes, like float planes, like 6-passenger, 10-passenger planes, are test flying electric, retrofitted, not purpose-built planes, but electric motors put into these planes. And they're hoping to start flying them by next year, commercially. They've had tons of successful flights. And so this is fantastic, right? We don't hear about it because all we care about are these big, overarching things. But right now, you know, things are happening on so many levels, and that's the way it always happens. That's the way change happens on every level.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I got on my high horse there.
I love
Excuse me.
Bueno, ahora os voy a
Now I will situate one against the other, because Ricard, the organizer of this festival, he told me you have to organize, you have to chair a round table with two authors, with two books. I had read one of them, but I thought that these books start in very different atmospheres. In Versailles waters, we are situated in 1738 with people with much money, champagne, party, sex, crazy things. And in the year of the witches, the atmosphere is very hostile. So I would like you to talk about this subject when talking about desire or repression. I would like to know which of the two starting points seem easier or more complicated to you.
I like to start with people who have everything, and then either have it taken away from them or find out that they didn't really want what they have anyway. So, as I said, the first chapter, Sylvain is having sex with his lover, and it's a culmination of months-long seduction. This is a political move as well, because Annette is politically situated in the court, and she is a very good person to have a relationship with, which, you know, it's a sexy situation, right? But what is happening at the moment when he is making his moves on her very skillfully is water starts dripping on him as they're reclining on the couch. And of course, the water systems in the palace are his. The pipes up there are ones that he has laid. A little bit of a metaphor there. Bad. He's being distracted. What is actually happening, as we find out as the story goes on, is that the Nixie that he has down in the cisterns, this child, is playing with him. She can control water. And she hasn't had any, she's bored. She's bored, and she hasn't had any attention from him. And so she is going to chase him basically around the palace by dripping water on him, even when he's trying to have sex with a nice lady who is very obliging. So, so I guess there's the idea of the desire being played with, or the desire being stymied. And so, yeah, that's definitely the place where we start off. His, I don't want to give any spoilers at the end, but no, I'm not going to give any spoilers. But, you know, go ahead. I can't even say anything.
It is really hard.
It's hard.
I don't know. All of my books I've started so entirely different. I'm a freak about the beginnings of my book. Like, I always write the beginning and the end, and then I have to figure out all the middle, what happens. Especially with the Grace Year, I'd written the beginning and the end, and that never changed from what I first wrote on a train ride, from New York to Washington. And when I delivered the draft to my editor, I was like, I thought it was great, of course. Yeah. And she said, like, the middle of this book, like, it's really she's just in the woods by herself. Like, I'm like, I know, isn't it awesome? She's like, no, it's not. It's not at all. So I had to really dig in and work on it. But the opening of a book, I can't actually move forward until the opening is perfect, right. And then I can move on. But it's the Grace Year was interesting, that the idea and everything for the book, the opening and the ending, came in just like a lightning bolt. I'd never had that happen before, and it, like I said, it never changed. It's kind of verbatim of what I originally wrote. So they're all different. Every book is entirely different for me. But I definitely, in the beginning of the Grace Year, wanted to drop the reader just in the middle of her life. And, it's a character, Tierney, who thinks she has everything figured out. And she has no idea. But I like that. I love that juxtaposition, if somebody thinks that they know everything, have it all figured out, and they just are so wrong about everything.
One of the rules that I have for writing is if the main character doesn't have anybody to talk to in a scene, that scene is broken. Especially right now, it's just.
I hear you.
Yeah. So did she end up alone in the woods still, or?
She did. I kept a portion of that, but because I love survival and all those types of things. So I'm really geek into that. But
well, it's imprinted in us from Jane Eyre, right? From Planet Bear, right?
Wow.
You remember?
Yes, I do. I do remember. But yeah, I really I still like all that part. I think there's a lot of people who are like, oh, that part is so slow, but I love it. I could have written an entire book like that. So, but yeah, it turned out good.
Well, you still can. I mean, every rule is made to be
right. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can get away with anything, if you can get away with it.
Exactly.
Muchas veces cuando pensamos.
Many times when we think about fantasy, the first thing we think about these unending, never-ending sagas of 400 tomes. In these cases, we have two stories, the self-contained of one single tome. And I wanted to ask you, in particular, your story is shorter as writers. How do you dig in the subjects, in the characters, when you just have a book to do it? Normally, it is more of an introduction. The second tome, you know more about the second volume, you know more about the characters, and the third one, everything exploits. So tell us about your plots, how you figure it out.
For me, like I said, I chose to tell the middle of the story, and it was honestly, like, if you thought about it, it's probably the least interesting part, because everybody loves an origin story and how they got there. I mean, everybody wants to know. And then in the end, like, everybody wants to see this victory and, change happening. But I was really drawn to the middle, and I felt like her story deserved to be told. And it was something that most people would have just glossed over. And I found to be really moving and pivotal for the story. But I know it drives people crazy. A lot of people, especially that are, really into, certain kinds of sci-fi and want to know, like, the when and the where and the what, and it drove a lot of people crazy not knowing. But it asked a lot of the reader, honestly, to say, like, let's dive in, relax. I'm going to take you on this journey. And fortunately, a lot of people went with it, and I'm really grateful. But it took a lot of trust for the reader. I think all of those stories are interesting. And honestly, I could have written an entire book on any one of those characters in the book. Like, I wish I was able to do more, but I chose to tell this story from Tierney's point of view, which is very focused and blinders on, and it's just her deal. There were a lot of other aspects of the characters that I would have liked to explore, but it wasn't their book, it was her book. So I stand by that.
My rule is from the great American writer Howard Waldrop, said that a short story should be about the most important thing that ever happened to a character. And I follow that because I'm really interested in the character's emotional and intellectual and psychic journey. With not a lot of padding. The longest thing that I have written is 40,000 words, so half of a normal-sized book. I'm trying to learn how to write longer. I would like to write books, but it seems as though for me there would be too much padding, and I don't want padding. I want my stories and my characters to be very incisive. So I still have to figure that out as a writer. Right now, when you read something of mine, it will be the story of one person, and the story of the most important thing that ever happened to them. That's what all of my stories are. And to me, that's what I like to read, so that's what I write.
I wish I could write short stories.
We all write different stuff,
yeah,
right?
But I admire it so much. It takes me 400 pages to get a thought across.
Well, I wish I could write 400 pages. I just can't quite get it yet. But they're different things, right?
Yeah.
We love what I'm really drawn to, things that I can't do. So, yeah.
I guess we can
share
that.
And you try to figure out, how did that writer do that?
Yeah.
How am I still interested? I'm reading Lonesome Dove right now for the first time.
Oh.
And he takes like 40 pages to discuss, I don't know, this like one part of the desert, and I'm just gobbling it. But it's so slow.
Yeah.
But I love it.
Oh,
how could I do
beautiful.
that? I want to do that, but I can't figure it out. I don't like you sometimes.
You will.
También quiero saber.
Yes, I also like to know if as readers you have also these preferences, or you read a bit of everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, any genre, as long as it's good writing, as long as it hits me emotionally, yeah, I'll read anything.
I'm a bit of I think it's because of when I grew up, but I'm dyslexic, and so reading was really hard for me. It was a skill that I didn't really enjoy until my late teens, when I finally got with it and realized how amazing it is. But so I think I always write with the reluctant kind of reader in mind, and try to keep everything moving, pretty quickly. And it's really, I couldn't even say how to do it. I just, it's just a compilation of a million things. But I feel like in my writing too, I love to read all different things. I've even enjoyed like reading some scripts recently. That's been pretty fun. It's a completely different art form and nothing I want to do, but I appreciate it. So I do. I like all of it.
And any kind of storytelling. My partner and I are obsessed with Korean dramas.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great storytelling in a lot of them.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Además del deseo y de...
In addition of desire and repression, we also find other subjects in the stories that might be not that important, but which are some more elements in each of the books, such as humor, this humoristic touch, or even letting some space for romantic love. How do you mix all these subjects?
Plain old storytelling. It's wonderful to have characters who are being intimate with each other. Intimacy is something that we only see in K-dramas. No, it's true. It's true. Is if you compare, say, an American romantic comedy with a Korean K-drama, in the American romantic comedy, the two people who are falling in love never spend any time together. And in the K-drama, they're constantly in each other's faces. It's fantastic. So I love scenes of intimacy. We have a wonderful scene. One of my favorite scenes in Waters of Versailles is when Sylvain and Annette, his new lover, are just lazing in bed. And she is giving him the gears about not being enough of a successful courtier, and trying to tell himself some home truths about his character, and they're just being relaxed and talking with each other, and I love that. It makes me happy because these are scenes where there is no inherent conflict, except that when two people talk to each other, there's always conflict of some kind. Because we're never on the same page. We can still have a wonderful ending to that scene, but not be in the same place at the end of it as we were at the beginning. But nothing has to, no monster has to come crashing through the walls.
Right.
Although you can do that too, and that's fun.
I mean, there's absolutely no humor in The Gracier. I'm sorry, but it is not a funny book. But some of my other books are horror. I cut my teeth on horror. So and I love humor and horror together. I absolutely love it. But it's so subjective, horror and humor. So that's the eye of the beholder, how successful that is. But The Gracier has a little bit of romance, but again, it's different. The circumstances are so strange, and I think in a lot of young adult books where there's always just like, my one true love, and there's many loves, it's not that black and white. I mean, it's a complicated little bit of Stockholm syndrome going on there, and the circumstances are not very romantic. So, but again, there's a lot of criticism, out there with literature, and especially feminist literature, where they think that romance doesn't belong in feminist literature, and I disagree. I mean, we all need love and deserve love, and I don't know. I don't see a separation there, and I think everyone's worthy of that. So
we all have to make ourselves vulnerable to someone.
Yeah.
Or our lives are pretty stark.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Bueno, vamos acercándonos.
Well, we are reaching an end, so please get prepared for your questions. Whilst you prepare your question, a last question from me. We are facing a complicated moment, not only due to pandemic, but due to this scarcity of supply, scarcity of paper, economic health crisis. The publishing houses are facing hard times. It is true that the rules have changed, but I would like to know how all this has impacted you, has affected you as writers in 2020 in your way of writing. I know that the figure of the writer is seen as someone who is locked down the whole day at home, so maybe there was not that difference vis-a-vis the previous years. But what can you tell us about these 3 months of lockdown? Were you enjoying this lockdown, or on the contrary, you wanted to escape from these closed walls?
Last year, Toronto had some very heavy lockdown. And what I found was when things were dark, I wanted to write light. So last year I wrote a lesbian stoner buddy comedy about with fairies about Brexit.
Sign me up.
That's coming out next year. What's interesting is it's coming out from Tor.com Publishing, which attempts to, is a Macmillan imprint, and attempts to give writers sort of the speed of self-publishing with, the high quality and the distribution of a traditional publisher. But even they, last year, could not get my book out more than 2 years after we signed the contract. So things are going slower, but that doesn't affect what I write, because I'm always going to write what I want to write. I'm always going to write the next thing that feels good and that I'm psychologically ready for. Yeah.
I think I took a break. I really did. And I started to feel really nervous about it because there's so many people, on Twitter or whatever, novel after novel during this pandemic.
Breaks are fine. Breaks are good.
I know, but I think this book took a lot out of me, and I was pretty exhausted. And it's the first time I only started writing when I was 40, so this is like a fourth career for me. So I had, done 5 books in, 5 years, and it was exhausted. So I really took the time to just do nothing, and I feel okay about it. I honestly do. I
don't think you did nothing because you have kids.
I do, but they're grown.
Okay.
I know. So it was, and we moved. We were longtime New Yorkers. We moved to Los Angeles at the height of the pandemic, which was crazy. They came in, hazmat suits to move us. But I think it was fine. I mean, it was so much going on, especially in the States with there were a lot of marches and there was a lot going on. I don't know how anybody was really that productive during that time, but people were.
Some were, some weren't. A lot of my performing arts friends just couldn't do a darn thing because there was nothing they could do.
No.
Actors, dancers, musicians, they were screwed.
It was bad.
Yeah. In comparison, writers have pretty easy.
I know. I actually did. My husband, the pandemic, he started working at home too. We've never been in each other's space before. It was terrible. He's so loud. Oh my gosh. So I got a little office now that's away from the house. That's good. And it's so nice. It's so quiet and it's great. So see how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. I also was working at home. What I found is, so we live downtown Toronto, my partner and I, and we live in a small condo. Living downtown is fantastic. Pre-pandemic, the outside is part of your house, but not so much during the pandemic. And I find that my seat at the kitchen table is right next to my now working at home desk. Used to be my writing desk. Now it's my working at home desk. Right next to my place on the couch. So it's basically working in 20 square feet. That's where I live. Yeah. And the cats would come in to visit me. So it was difficult. Yeah, but I couldn't let myself whine about it
I know.
Because other people just had it so much worse.
I know. I was so lucky to be able to just. Yeah, it's pretty harrowing. A lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. So we both try not to whine.
Yeah.
We had it good.
Bueno, pues ahora si os parece bien pasamos al turno de preguntas.
Okay, good. Let's move to the questions of our audience. There's a microphone. If anyone has a question or a comment, please, anyone wants to break the ice, we still have 10 minutes left for your questions to the others. No, not the bank data accounts, but anything else about literature or about her stories. their stories. Hello, good evening. My question is, how do you schedule, how do you prepare the plot, the characters, the chapters? Are you doing by chance a little bit as it goes out, or do you previously plan it consciously?
Yeah, go ahead.
For me, I know the beginning, I know the end, and I know a few points along the way. And so I find my way through for that. I know where I might want my character to go. And there is still a lot of discovery and a lot of surprises on there. And it's also loose enough for me to, if it's not working, I can figure out why it's not working. And it's always character that's not working, for me anyway.
I'm similar. Like at the beginning and the end is everything for me, and then I can figure the rest out. It takes me a really long time, but I eventually get there.
Everybody's different though, right?
Yeah.
There's no rule.
No, and I was just talking to my publisher just right before we came on stage, where I had always been just, you start, you figure it out, as you go. And I was saying, like, because I have to rewrite a draft probably 3 or 4 times,
For sure.
that's just how I do it. But I would get kind of exhausted, from it's just exhausting to work that hard and throw something away and do it again. And so I had this friend that's a brilliant writer, and she was like, do what I do. She was like, just write less and think more, and you will be less tired and blah. So I really tried. I thought a lot. and then when I went down to write, I found myself just being paralyzed by it. I do what I do, which is a lot of errors, a lot of mishaps, and I just have to do it. I have to start, and I have to work through it. That's just the way that I do it.
One of the things about progressing as a writer is discovering your own rhythms. Right. And everyone's going to be nobody's going to do it like anybody else does it. My partner is a fantastic science fiction fantasy writer, and we couldn't be more different in our processes. It's just what works for them doesn't work for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, somewhat related, do you have a routine do you have a routine for writing, or like a ritual to start the book that you absolutely must do?
It's different. There's some books, like there was one book that I wrote that it was completely on scent. I had designed, a fragrance for each character, and I could smell that fragrance, and it could pull me into that character. Sometimes it's music. Sometimes, it's all kinds of things. It's always different every time for me of what I have to do to pull myself in.
I don't have that kind of thing, but similar to that, one of the ways in which I think and which I work out problems is I have a large sketchbook, which I just make a freaking mess in when I'm stuck. And I will just scribble on it, and I'll circles and arrows and diagrams,
Smart.
and I'll write, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, over and over again. And just the act of actually just moving my hands gets my brain working, because I'm a very tactile person. I don't think unless my hands are moving. So that's something that really works for me. Might work for other people, might not.
Another thing, I don't know if you're a writer, but that kind of worked for me was index cards or Post-it notes. And I like to get on the floor, just lay everything out. I like that whole way of learning, and, just by moving things around. And so I do a lot of that until it fits right, until it feels right. But I don't move on from something until it sings for me. I just don't. It'll get stuck on something for a very long time.
If you're ever trying to put short stories in order, if you're doing a short story collection, I highly recommend writing all the titles on index cards and shuffling them around and putting them in order. That way really worked for me.
That's neat.
Just like writing out the titles, no. But if you're moving them around, that actually feels right?
That's neat.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
¿Alguna otra pregunta por ahí?
Any other question in in the room? Okay, so then thank you very much. Many thanks. I hope you enjoyed the attendance of the others. I want to thank Salamandra Yames for bringing us these two marvelous authors, and to the festival for allowing me to moderate this talk. The others will be just outside on the right. There is a tent for signatures. There is a stall where you will be able to find the books, which are novelties. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this round table. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. Okay.